God does not say Adam was perfect. It says that he was very good. Now we need to ask the harder question. What happens if we insist that he was perfect? Because once you assume perfection at the beginning, certain pressures begin to build, and they don't stay small. They reach all the way up into how we talk about God himself. If Adam was created perfect, fully mature, spiritually complete, confirmed in righteousness, then his fall is catastrophic collapse. And once you say that collapse occurs under divine providence, you must answer something uncomfortable. Why create a perfect being who will fall? If history unfolds exactly as God eternally knew it would, then was the fall avoidable? Or was it somehow necessary? You can feel the pressure building already. If the fall was necessary for redemption, and redemption was necessary for election, and election displays the maximal glory of God, then evil begins to look instrumental. Not tragic. Instrumental. And that's where people instinctively recoil. When I embraced Calvinism, we were attending a Calvary Chapel church, a church committed strongly to free will. I told the pastor about my shifting views. He listened, and then he said something simple. I could never embrace that because it makes God the author of evil. At the time, I thought he misunderstood Reformed theology. Reformed theologians do not say that God authors evil. They draw careful distinctions between decree and causation. But I understood his instinct, because once everything falls under exhaustive divine decree, once nothing happens outside what God knowingly and willingly ordains, people ask, if it could not have unfolded otherwise, how is God not responsible? That question doesn't come from rebellion. It comes from moral intuition. To be honest, I could have heard my 5-year-old son ask me a question like that. But Arminians are not off the hook. Here's what took me longer to see. Arminians often accuse Augustinians and Calvinists of making God the author of evil. But historically, they are wrestling with the same dilemma. Because even in Arminian theology, God creates knowing Adam will fall. God could have refrained from creating. God could have created differently. Yet this world comes into being. So the question remains, why create a world you know will collapse? At that point, both systems appeal to mystery. Calvinists say, God decrees, yet is not morally culpable. How does that work? It's a mystery. Arminians say, God foreknows, yet does not determine. And again, how does that work? It's a mystery. Because in both cases, God knew, Adam fell, history unfolds as it does, permission begins to feel like inevitability. Because both begin with the same anthropology: perfect Adam, catastrophic fall, divine foreknowledge. This disagreement is about mechanics, not the starting point. Let's simplify free will. For clarity, here are the broad categories. Libertarian free will. You could genuinely have chosen otherwise. Determinism. All events are ultimately fixed by prior causes. It's like the domino effect. Then there's compatibilism. God determines all things, yet humans act according to their desires and are responsible. With compatibilism, original sin and guilt are already assumed. And here's why. Again, I'll repeat. God determines all things, yet humans act according to their desires and are responsible. Well, how are you responsible? You're responsible because you sinned with Adam when he sinned. He's your federal head. He's your representative. You're present inevitably in Adam. And you act according to your desires. Well, what are your desires now that you're fallen? They're all evil. God doesn't let you do all the evil you would like to do. So he restrains you with what they call common grace. And common grace is both a restrictive sort of idea and where Jesus says the rain falls on the just and the unjust. Like there's also a blessing element. God shows kindness to sinners who will never be redeemed. But he also keeps them from doing as much wickedness as they would like to do. Otherwise, the whole world would be on fire. Compatibilism tries to preserve sovereignty and responsibility simultaneously. Jonathan Edwards is famous for this. But if Adam was perfect and God decreed the fall, and Adam's desires unfold exactly as decreed, was there ever a real possibility of not falling? If not, probation becomes performance. And again, probation as this like waiting period in Eden that would eventually perpetuate ongoing non-static existence in communion with God. And then evil begins to look and to function structurally. So what does permission mean? Because both Western Christianity and Orthodoxy say God permitted the fall. But that word does not always mean the same thing. In a decree-based system, permission is encompassed within the eternal divine design. Nothing could have unfolded otherwise. Permission functions inside inevitability, this tension between responsibility and freedom. That people are really blameworthy, and yet could they have chosen otherwise? In Orthodox theology, permission functions differently. God permits the fall because love cannot be coerced, because communion must be free, not because catastrophe is required for greater glory, not because evil is architecturally necessary, but because freedom is real. That is a different metaphysical posture. One integrates evil into the structure, the other allows evil as tragic rupture. Gottfried Leibniz argued that this is the best of all possible worlds. I'll give a short explanation. If God is perfectly good and rational, he would only create the best possible reality. I only mention this because his best of all worlds theodicy, the explanation for how evil can coexist with a good God who's all-knowing, all-loving, etc., is extremely influential. Many Calvinists hold to it. And he's also a famous mathematician. If God is perfectly good and rational, he would only create the best possible reality, which implies if this world contains evil, then evil must somehow be necessary for the greatest good. This logic has shaped centuries of thought. It even anticipates modern multiverse speculation, the idea that perhaps countless worlds are possible, but this one is optimal. But notice what happens if that's true. The fall was not tragic in the deepest sense. It was optimal. It had to happen. And if it had to happen, evil is no longer parasitic, it becomes necessary. At this point, theology often appeals to mystery. And mystery is real, but sometimes mystery becomes a way of holding together claims that strain coherence. God ordains all things. God is not the author of evil. The fall was necessary for glory. Adam could have done otherwise. Tension becomes normal, but tension is not always depth. Sometimes tension signals that the starting point needs re-examining. The Eastern tradition avoids this trap by framing evil differently. Evil is not a created thing. It has no independent substance. It is parasitic. Like darkness is the absence of light, like rot is the corruption of something good. Evil does not need to be willed. It emerges when communion is severed. And this connects directly to Christ's words, I am the vine, you are the branches. Branches wither when cut off. They do not need to be legally condemned to die. They die because they are severed from life. That's an organic model. not primarily forensic. Now, if Adam was perfect, then his fall requires explanation at the level of divine design. I'll repeat that. If Adam was perfect, then his fall requires explanation at the level of divine design. But if Adam was very good, immature, called to grow, then the fall is tragic derailment, not optimal architecture, not necessary stage setting. It's tragic. Evil remains parasitic, not instrumental. Permission retains allowance of freedom, not inevitability. God does not need evil. God does not require catastrophe. Communion was the goal, and rupture is the distortion of communion. If evil must exist for the best possible world to exist, then it is no longer parasitic. But if evil is parasitic, if it is distortion of communion, then it need not be willed for glory. It need only be permitted because love is real. Very good, not perfect. Communion, not inevitability. And that difference changes how we speak about God. Join me next time for part 3 of Very Good is a Long Way from Perfect.